We go now, the home stretch for 2016 Election Day. Only 15 days from today, and the focus is on Florida, where polls are now open for early voting. Wow. 29 electoral votes down there. Good morning, everybody. Hope you had a great weekend. I'm Bill Hemmer as we go now into America's newsroom. How you doing?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well.
Good weekend.
Yes.
Didn't see you all weekend. That hasn't happened in a while.
Won't last long.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum. So as you know, Florida is really make or break in this election. Polls show Hillary Clinton with a narrow lead there. Donald Trump campaigning there last night. He told voters in Florida he doesn't trust these numbers.
I'll tell you what, we're doing well in the polls, but you know, I really think those polls are very inaccurate when it comes to women. I think we're doing better with women than with men, frankly.
We think we can win it, so we're doing everything we can. But we're not running away with this. This race is going to be competitive up until the end.
So here is the map today. It's all on the East Coast. Trump has several events in Florida today. Tim Kaine represents the Clinton team in that state today. She is in New Hampshire, while Mike Pence is in North Carolina.
Senior national correspondent John Roberts live in St. Augustine, Florida today. Good morning, John.
Martha, good morning to you. And at this point, it's all about getting out the vote. Donald Trump with 3 stops in 3 different counties today. Let's put the map up for you so we can describe where he's going to be. First of all, he's got some smaller events, not big rallies in Palm Beach County. Then he moves up here to St. Johns County, where we are in St. Augustine. And then later this afternoon, evening, he'll be in Hillsborough County, which is where Tampa is. What those counties all have in common is people are early voting as of this morning in all 3 of those counties. Not all of Florida counties are open to early voting as of this morning. They kind of stagger it throughout the week, but those 3 are. Yesterday, he was in Collier County in Naples, another city that's open, another county rather, that's open for early voting today. A big rally in that city where he again doubled down or quadrupled or octupled down on this idea that the voting is rigged, that this whole political system is rigged against him, refusing to back down or apologize on that. Also hitting Hillary Clinton very hard on this new WikiLeaks revelation that she tried to negotiate a $12 million donation to the Clinton Foundation with the King of Morocco. Here's what Donald Trump said about that.
WikiLeaks emails show Hillary was trying to get $12 million from the King of Morocco in yet another pay-for-play scheme. My goal is to keep foreign money out of American politics. Hillary Clinton's goal is to put the Oval Office up for sale to whatever country offers the highest price.
Donald Trump will also be hammering hard today this revelation in the Wall Street Journal that a PAC associated with Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe gave almost $500,000 to a 2015 state Senate candidate named Dr. Jill McCabe for her campaign. What's significant about that? Dr. Jill McCabe is married to Andrew McCabe, who is now the second in command at the FBI and had direct oversight over the Hillary Clinton email investigation. The FBI is saying there's nothing to this story, but watch for the Trump campaign to hammer that hard today. Martha?
Quite a story. Front page of the Wall Street Journal today. So, John, some in the media are citing these new polls that show Donald Trump really in trouble in some of them. What's the campaign reaction to that?
They're saying don't count us out just yet, and Donald Trump certainly has defied the odds before, and there's a little bit of mixed news in the polls. If you take a look at an ABC tracking poll, it's got Hillary Clinton up by 12 points, 50-38, but an Investor's Business Daily tracking poll is out today. It had Donald Trump up by 2 points. They're now even at 41-41. Certainly his path to victory is fairly narrow. He can afford to lose neither Florida nor Ohio. And Kellyanne Conway, his campaign manager, said yesterday morning, we may be down, but we're not out. Listen.
We are behind. She has some advantages like $66 million in ad buys just in the month of September. We feel that with Hillary Clinton under 50% in some of these places, even though she has run a very traditional and expensive campaign, that we have a shot of getting those undecided voters that somehow have said, I know who Hillary Clinton is, I don't want to vote for her, I don't much trust her, like her. We need to bring them aboard over the next couple of weeks.
But some potentially troubling indicators coming out of the state of Nevada, where early voting shows in Clark County, which is Las Vegas, Democrats are 2-1 over Republicans in early voting, and up about a third in Washoe County, which is where Reno is. But Democrats typically do prevail in early voting, Republicans on Election Day. Martha?
Fascinating. There's a lot of numbers to look at out there right now, John, with 2 weeks to go. Thank you very much.
So outside the battlegrounds now, some historically red states are turning less so, it would appear. That will include Texas, as the tracking site in Real Clear Politics shows that might be a toss-up. More on that in a moment. Byron York, chief political correspondent, Washington Examiner, Fox News contributor. Byron, good morning to you. You are in Charlotte, North Carolina. You're in the belly of the political beast. Generally speaking, what is the state of the race today?
Well, Kellyanne Conway is right. Trump is behind. If you look at a lot of the national polls, he's in the 37, 38, 39% range. You don't win with 38, 39%. You just heard Donald Trump say he thinks he's doing better with women than he is with men. He is not doing better with women than with men. He's substantially behind Hillary Clinton among women. His problem is that his strength among men voters, which used to be pretty big, used to be a pretty big positive gender gap for him, that strength is actually declining. So he's actually not in such great shape now, according to the polls, which is why you're hearing him say he doesn't believe the polls now.
I think you're going to get a good sample as to whether or not North Carolina has truly changed. You go back to 2012 and 2008. But here's a couple of things that are interesting. In Texas, you put all the polls together in the state of Texas, there's about 4.5 point difference there. You put all the polls together in the state of Arizona, it's about a point in favor of Hillary Clinton. There's Texas, now Arizona clicks through. What do you think about these numbers?
Yeah, you can throw Georgia in there, too. These are states that you would expect, especially Texas and Georgia, to be very, very strongly Republican, and they're not right now. Trump has a lead, but not a very big lead. And I think what has happened is, if you look after the Access Hollywood tape, after the answer at the debate in which he said he wouldn't promise to accept the results of the election, enthusiasm among Republican voters has gone down. They're telling pollsters they're not as excited about voting as they were, and they're not as excited specifically about Donald Trump as they were. The problem for Trump is Republicans who supported somebody else in the Republican primaries, but then when Trump clinched the nomination, they decided to support him. They were going to support the party's nominee. That's getting a little harder for them now, and their enthusiasm to vote appears to be going down.
Let me put the electoral scorecard back on. This is we take all the polls from different states and we work with our brain room to figure out what's happening out there. Arizona's a toss-up in our view. So is the state of Utah. We talked about Texas. It used to be a deep red. Now it leans red. You know, it still will. It could go Republican, but we've moved that out of that area. And you just mentioned the state of Georgia as well. Do you get a sense that this election is truly shifting the political ground in some of these states that that have been reliably Democratic or reliably Republican for decades now, Byron?
Well, it's bad news for Republicans, but it may be temporary bad news for Republicans. I've talked to operatives in some of the states where you have members of the Senate, Republicans who are running for re-election, and some of them have found that voters see their Republican senator as a Republican, but they see Donald Trump as Trump, and that he's almost in a different category from their candidate. So it could be that Trump would be this sort of one-off historical phenomenon, and fundamental support for the Republican Party in places like Georgia and Texas remains relatively unchanged later on.
It's a very interesting last point. Thank you. Enjoy your time in Charlotte. Byron York,
Bill.
analysis you bet on a Monday morning. Thank you, Martha.
So meanwhile, looming over this campaign are these continued WikiLeaks releases from the inbox of Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta. We've been watching these over the last several weeks. On Fox News Sunday, Chris Wallace calling out Clinton campaign manager Robbie Mook for his selective outrage when things are leaked. Watch this interesting exchange.
These are stolen documents, stolen by the Russians. It's now confirmed from John Podesta. They are being put out for exactly this purpose.
Well,
the Russians and Donald Trump want this campaign to be about something else right now.
Well, let me just speak to that, though, because, you know, the Trump tax returns were stolen as well when they were mailed to the New York Times. You guys didn't object to that. In fact, you jumped all over them.
Well, we don't know where those tax returns come from.
Well, they were clearly stolen.
We don't know, and you'd have
do you think
work
do you
with
think
the
that Trump
on that.
had given them?
I don't know. I don't know how they got to the New York Times.
I guess what I'm saying is if we're looking at the fruits of that theft, and I will call it a theft, it's fair to look at the fruits of your theft.
So there's that.
I think what's going on here, the amazing thing about the evidence that you use about another campaign is it's all electronic now. You know, and if you can get your hands on it, wow, you've got a story, and we've seen it for some time. There's also this new wrinkle involving Hillary Clinton's dealings with the FBI. The wife of a federal agent getting hundreds of thousands of dollars from a longtime Clinton ally, and that very agent later held Mrs. Clinton's hand in his fate. Now, Karl Rove's going to analyze all that, the facts about that story coming up in a moment here today.
And Hillary Clinton's team looking past Donald Trump, trying to help Democrats take back the Senate. But is she measuring the drapes too early, some might ask?
Also a tragedy on an American freeway, a bus plowing into a semi-truck, and investigators want to know why and how this happened.
I flew off. I hate it. I hate all the seats in them. I got my jaw out of place, my face all just broken. No.
California highway over the weekend. This crash left 13 people dead, 31 injured. It was so mangled, this bus, that the firefighters had to use ladders to climb into the windows to try to remove some of those victims.
I will tell you, the speed of the bus was so significant that when it hit the back of the big rig, the trailer itself entered about 15 feet into the bus. So you can see that it was a substantial impact.
The bus was traveling on the I-10 near Palm Springs, carrying people home from a trip to a casino. Right now, investigators aren't ruling out any cause, and they are continuing to look into it.
New revelations about the Clinton investigation by the FBI. Federal records revealing a super PAC tied to longtime Clinton ally Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe donated $500,000 to the 2015 campaign of Jill McCabe. She was running Virginia State Senate at the time. Her husband, Andrew, was later promoted to deputy director of the FBI, and he would eventually help oversee the investigation of Hillary Clinton's emails. Karl Rove, former White House deputy director for President Bush and a Fox News contributor. And Karl, good morning to you. There's a lot to follow here. Let's try and keep it as simple as possible here. Does this smell, in your view?
It does have the appearance of impropriety. Look, let's walk through the chronology. March of 2015, Jill McCabe and her husband, Andrew McCabe, an FBI official, then the director of the D.C. office, field office, a visit with Terry McAuliffe, governor of Virginia, who encourages her to run for the Senate, pledges that he'll back her if she does. She shortly thereafter becomes a candidate for the state Senate in that year's state Senate election. Really important to McAuliffe. He wants control of the state Senate in order to move his agenda. This is also the same month when it is revealed to the country that Hillary Clinton has had a private email server in her house in Chappaqua, New York, through which she handled all of her email while she was Secretary of State. By July, there's an investigation underway, and McCabe, as the D.C. field office director, is supplying support and personnel for that investigation. By the end of the month, he's promoted and made the #3 official at the Department of Justice, and shortly after the first of the year, 2016, becomes the #2 official and is a member of the executive management team of the FBI overseeing this investigation. Now, it strikes me that he should have said to himself, you know what, Terry McAuliffe gave my wife a third of the money that she had for her campaign, either directly from the super PAC that he controlled or from the Democratic Party of Virginia, which he ran. And I think he should have said to himself, you know what, I really need to recuse myself from any involvement in this matter. McAuliffe is a close ally of Hillary Clinton. I don't know whether he's involved in this or not, but out of an abundance of caution, let somebody else supervise this part. I will recuse myself from any management, executive management duties supervising this.
Okay, let me ask you a few basic questions. She lost her election, right? Now, this is
lost in November of 2015.
State Senate seat.
Yeah.
$1.5 million. I mean, I don't know how these campaigns run, but it seems like a lot of money. Is it?
Well, $1.8 million, and yes, it's a lot of money. Now, remember, this is critical for McAuliffe's success. I think the Democrats were down by 1 seat in the state Senate. He was trying to flip the chamber so that his agenda would have a better chance. But look, the onus is not on McAuliffe. He's out there trying to win a state Senate seat, trying to win control of the state Senate. The onus is on the FBI official, Andrew McCabe, who should have been sensitive, in my opinion, to these things. And because he wasn't, now all kinds of questions, right or wrong, all kind of suspicion, justified or unjustified, all kind of allegations, backed or not backed, are going to arise about his involvement in the handling of this affair.
And McAuliffe goes back for the years with the Clintons, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm very active. I'm one of their big fundraisers in 91 and 92, yeah. Been close friends for decades. I mean, they campaigned for him when he ran for governor. He was an intimate of theirs when he was in the White House. He's one of their closest personal friends. So, yeah,
okay.
He goes back decades.
Let's see where that story goes, and I want to see where this story goes as well. You said on Fox News Sunday the following about the state of the race today and whether or not Trump can win. Watch.
He would have to not only win 2 states where he is either only slightly ahead or behind by 4, but he would have to pick up states where he is behind by, at, or above the national average. I don't see it happening.
That last part, I don't see it happening. What is the suggestion with that comment as to the state of this race? Are you saying it's over or not?
Well, I earlier said that he would have to pull to an inside straight. I didn't think it likely, but the race will not be over until November 8th. People are voting. We're over 6 million people have voted as of this morning, and he's behind. And my point is that he's got to win Florida, where he is behind by 4 points in the Real Clear Politics average. He has to win Ohio, where he is up by less than a point. He has to win Iowa, where he is on the Real Clear Politics average outside the margin of error. But to get to 270, he's got to win states where he is at or above the national average of the gap. He's got to win a Pennsylvania or a Wisconsin or a Colorado or New Hampshire and Michigan or some combination thereof. And it's an inside straight. Difficult to do. People do it. But it's really, really tough to do.
All right, Carl, we're going to show the map for our viewers in about 30 minutes, too. Thanks. See you real soon. Carl Rove there in Washington, D.C. Thank you, sir. 20 past.
So Donald Trump making his case to voters with a major speech over the weekend.
It's a contract between Donald J. Trump and the American voter, and it begins with bringing honesty, accountability, and change to Washington, D.C.
So we're going to show you the elements of what he listed and went through in that Gettysburg speech over the weekend. But most of what the media reported about the speech was a threat that he made to sue the women who have accused him, he says, falsely during the course of this election campaign. He called that another instance of unfair coverage. Howie Kurtz joins us to break that down.
Also, thousands of service members being told to give back their bonuses because the Pentagon says they were overpaid.
Unbelievable.
How does that happen? There is a manhunt underway in Oklahoma this morning for the man accused of shooting 2 police officers there. Michael Vance, ex-convict, believed to be armed with an AK-47. Police say they were responding to a call about a shooting in a trailer park near Oklahoma City when he opened fire. They say he stole a patrol car, then carjacked a woman, drove away in her car. Vance is also wanted in connection with the deaths of 2 of his relatives. The officers are expected to be okay.
We will drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. and replace it with a new government of, by, and for the people. Believe me. That is why I have chosen Gettysburg to unveil this contract. I'm asking the American people to rise above the noise and the clutter.
Donald Trump in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania over the weekend, laying out what he calls a contract with American voters. He did that, as I said, on Saturday, and it was full of moments like the one you just saw, but the media focused more on the next line, where Trump went after the women who have accused him of sexual assault or harassment. Watch this.
All of these liars will be sued after the election is over. But a simple phone call placed to the biggest newspapers or television networks gets them wall-to-wall coverage with virtually no fact-checking whatsoever.
Howie Kurtz, Fox News media analyst and host of Media Buzz. Good morning to you, Howie.
Good morning.
Obviously he is still very upset about the charges that these women brought, but a lot of people believe that he stepped on his own message with this contract.
Stepped on his own message would be a polite way of putting it. Look, the media have a bias towards scandal over substance. No argument there. It's baked into the cake. Every politician knows it. So this was a heavily promoted address at Gettysburg in which Donald Trump was going to try to refocus his candidacy on these policy issues, this contract with American voters. And if that was all he had said, then that would have been the story for the day. Instead, he goes back into the women who have accused him, calls them liars, says he's going to sue them, which is a new element, accuses the media of not fact-checking, which is not right. Certain news organizations have talked to other witnesses who the complainants had shared their stories with at the time, and so it's hardly shocking that if Trump's going to serve all these vegetables, broccoli and Brussels sprouts and mushrooms of policy, and then he serves up an ice cream sundae in the form of going back to the women he's going to sue them, that the press would go for dessert.
Yeah, I mean, just politically, it's a bad move because that was not in the conversation over the last several days, and then he put it right back into the conversation with that comment, which is politically probably not the way to go. Let's take a look at some of what he offered in this new contract because it would have gotten more attention had he not made that other comment. Congressional term limits is part of this contract that he proposes, a freeze on hiring federal workers, crackdown on leaving Congress and then becoming a lobbyist, lifetime ban on senior executive officials lobbying foreign governments, which would include, the former Secretary of State raising money from foreign governments, I would imagine, and a 2-year mandatory sentence. If you are an illegal immigrant and you are kicked out of this country and you return, you would get a 2-year mandatory sentence. All of which are ideas that could be very compelling to conservatives in this country, Howie, if he hadn't stepped on the message.
Right. I mean, some of this he said before, but some of these proposals were new. And if he had made these proposals and stayed with them in the beginning of September or the end of September, it really fits his candidacy well. And he's the outsider billionaire running against the status quo, running against Hillary Clinton as a symbol of a failed system. I think these really would have resonated. But we've seen this problem with Trump before. After the Democratic convention, he spent several days attacking the Khan family, the Gold Star family that spoke at the convention. We saw it after the first debate with the Alicia Machado, the former Miss Universe. He kept that story alive. And I think the legitimate story about the women who've accused Donald Trump of sexual misconduct was really starting to fade, as you noted. And then with that, even that one paragraph at Gettysburg, he brought it back to the fore, I
want to get your thoughts on this 2-page spread in today's New York Times. They spent a lot of ink on this one, and it covers the people or institutions that they say Donald Trump has insulted over the course of the election. Can we expect that they will run something similar on Hillary Clinton, Howie?
No. Now, I can't object on journalistic grounds to using a candidate's own words and even doing a big compilation because people aren't always paying attention every single day of what he said on Twitter and all of that. But it's a question of volume, and we see this in all the major media outlets that focus so heavily on Trump, and much of that is negative. Why not devote 2 full pages to many of the WikiLeaks hacked emails involving John Podesta and the Hillary Clinton campaign? Those have dribbled out day by day. I'd like to see a big compilation of that. And so that's the thing that gives people the impression that many elements in the press are not just reporting on Donald Trump, but are almost campaigning against him.
It doesn't even to be a pretense of being fair in this particular case. But it's worth reading. There's some funny stuff in there. He goes after the state of New Jersey, Major League Baseball, and calls them ridiculous and somehow makes the list as well.
Ouch.
So anyway, Howie, thank you very much. Good to see you as always.
Donald Trump's team telling the Clinton camp, hang on now, not so fast.
The fact is that this race is not over. Many in the media want to say it's over. For the 12th time, they're counting Donald Trump out.
So are the Democrats getting ahead of themselves? We'll put that question to our political panel in a moment. Plus, there is this.
In the fight to take back the ISIS stronghold of Mosul. Has this battle been stalled in its tracks? We'll talk about it when we come back.
The battle over Mosul is not expected to end quickly. That's the word from the Iraqi government this morning, where about 5,000 U.S. troops are back on the ground in Iraq. Iraqi special forces shelling Islamic State positions. Connor Powell watching that from Jerusalem with the latest from there. Connor.
Yeah, Bill, since this operation began a week ago, the Iraqi security forces and Kurdish Peshmerga fighters have made considerable progress. That according to U.S. Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter, who was in Iraq over the weekend meeting with Iraqi leaders. Now, since this operation in the last week or so began, they've captured and liberated about 80 or so ISIS-held villages in and around Mosul. That is a significant number of the ISIS-held territory outside of Mosul. But the real fight is going to begin in the next several days and several weeks as Iraqi security forces are on the brink of pushing into that city of Mosul. Now, as they've begun to push closer and closer to Mosul, they are seeing more and more fierce resistance. ISIS burning sulfur over the weekend, creating a large black plume of smoke over the town, over the city and that entire area, trying to sort of disrupt military operations. They've also sent out suicide bombers and booby-trapped both roads and buildings. So ISIS putting up a significant amount of fight, particularly as they are getting closer to Mosul. Iraqi security forces and officials saying this is sort of the next phase that will begin in the next few days or so. They are going slow, Bill, as we've talked many times. They want to leave as much infrastructure in place, and so that really is the key. But overall, Pentagon and Iraqi officials are pleased with the progress they've made, but they are not saying that this is anywhere near over. ISIS, they have a lot of respect for them as fighters, and they are continually putting up a lot of stiff resistance, Bill.
It's going to be tough stuff, tough going. Connor Powell, thank you from our Middle East Bureau today.
The fact that it's been 3 points, 4 points, 6 points is what can turn around in these next 2 weeks. The fact is that this race is not over. Many in the media want to say it's over. For the 12th time, they're counting Donald Trump out. We're not giving up. We know we can win this, and we are certainly not acceding to the same chattering class that's been wrong about Donald Trump for about a year and a half.
Kellyanne Conway yesterday on Fox News Sunday. Donald Trump confident that his supporters will show up on Election Day and that they will propel him to victory. Hillary Clinton's team encouraged by the polls, so much so that they are looking beyond the White House to the key Senate races. Morgan Ortagus is national co-chair of the Maverick PAC and is a former financial intelligence analyst for the Treasury Department. Marianne Marsh is former senior advisor to John Kerry. Welcome to both of you. Great to have you here today. So, Morgan, when you look at today's map and where everybody is, Hillary Clinton spending time in New Hampshire, that would send a very strong sign of confidence, would it not?
I think so. Listen, it's a tough race for Trump, and it's a tough race for these Republican Senate office holders. What I'm amazed at is despite the ABC News poll showing Trump down by 12 points nationally, and these close Senate races, like in New Hampshire and North Carolina, even in Ohio, the Republicans are actually faring pretty well. They're keeping it competitive races, despite being massively outspent by Democrats. And, of course, Hillary Clinton having just a very built-in advantage of having the president, the first lady, the former President Bill Clinton, Biden. I mean, she has a whole roster of people out there campaigning for her nationally, which she needs to, because to be quite frank, she isn't that popular.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few polls that show Donald Trump leading in the national race, and many of these battleground states are pretty tight. But even Kellyanne Conway admitted over the weekend that they feel like they've got obviously some work to do and that he's behind. Here's an ad that Kelly Ayotte is running right now in New Hampshire. Let's watch.
America's future is far from certain, but no matter who the next president is, New Hampshire needs a strong voice in the U.S. Senate. That's Senator Kelly Ayotte.
So that sounds like an argument to people who may be leaning towards Hillary Clinton, Marianne, to continue to vote Republican on the rest of that ballot.
No question about it. And that's the problem, Martha. You have especially a lot of Republican women who've now decided to vote against Donald Trump for Hillary Clinton, and they look at these Senate races. Those women aren't going to vote for Kelly Ayotte now in New Hampshire. They're going to vote for Maggie Hassan. They're not going to vote for Pat Toomey. They're going to vote for Katie McGinty. Why would they,
Marianne?
So now,
I sort of disagree with that notion because, you know, as Byron York said earlier today, it's almost as if many voters look at this as sort of, you know, Donald Trump as his own entity, you know, and the rest of these people who are running as Republicans and Democrats. So if they're in favor of Trump, they're going to vote Trump. But they may want to put in a check on power in case Hillary Clinton wins and go Republican down the rest of the ticket. Chris Darwal's been arguing that this is what's going to happen for months.
Well, here's the problem, Martha. The two Republican senators I just mentioned never checked Donald Trump until it was too late. In fact, Toomey still hasn't said he won't vote for him, and Kilmeade just did that. So for the Republican women and suburban women and independent women who finally rejected Donald Trump,
why would those Republican women care that much if those individuals didn't go the way they wanted him to go on Donald Trump when they do care about things like smaller government and Supreme Court picks?
Because if you look, Kellyanne Conway is a pollster first and foremost. She knows exactly what she's looking at. And what they are seeing is for Republican women to out and out reject Donald Trump, they are rejecting people who supported him as well. That's why Republican senators who didn't bring Morgan back in here. That's in the polling. Yeah. That's the polling, Martha.
Morgan,
that's the polling.
What do you think about that, Morgan?
I don't know what specific polling she's referring to, but in my experience, my PAC, Maverick PAC, has supported Kilmeade, and the women that I work with around the country under 40. A lot of them admittedly have issues with Donald Trump, but they're still very energized about bringing the party together and keeping the Senate close. Listen, Republicans are being massively outspent in these Senate races, and they're still making it competitive despite our national candidate being down. So when it comes to the Senate, it's definitely not over yet. And I think that we all have to do the American people a courtesy of not determining 2 weeks from now what the election's going to look like. People still have the chance to vote, and people still want their voice to be heard. And, listen, I mean, Hillary Clinton is still wildly unpopular, no matter how much people would like to run a victory lap.
I mean, the Supreme Court is, the Senate is the key to those confirmations, and I think that's going to probably weigh heavily for a lot of Republican women.
Martha, last point. I mean, the fact is, people are sick of Washington not working, and the Republicans have run the Senate and the House for years now and gotten nothing done. So they want Washington to work.
So Hillary Clinton's
making Hillary Clinton putting Democrats in there.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies.
Putting Democrats in there to get things done.
We'll pick it up next time.
So amid the latest polling numbers, the Trump team sees a way to 270. We'll show you the board in a moment on that. Plus this coming up.
Dashcam video shows a terrifying pursuit as a driver fires more than a dozen shots out the window at police officers behind them.
You okay?
Central California, yet another reminder this morning of the dangers that the police face every day. Driver opens fire during an attempted traffic stop, reaching out the window of his SUV during a wild chase. This is in Madeira. More than a dozen shots fired. Thankfully, the officer was not hurt. Very close call. Look at that windshield on the cruiser. It was completely blown out. Authorities are searching for the gunman.
She's still under 50 everywhere, and she spent $66 million in ads, mostly negative politics and personal destruction ads against Donald Trump just in September. Our path is Florida, Ohio, Iowa, North Carolina. You add Nevada there, you protect Arizona and Georgia.
Did you hear that last part of that? Kellyanne Conway yesterday on the battle for 270 electoral votes. Can Trump do it? And how does he do it? John McCormack, senior writer, Weekly Standard. John, how you doing that in Washington, D.C.? Good morning to you. I want to show our viewers at home right now precisely how this would play out based on what Kellyanne just said. All right, she said Florida. You can see the numbers changing. 270 is where you need to go. He would be at 193 at that point. She said Ohio. She said Iowa. She said North Carolina. She said you add Nevada, you protect Arizona, and you protect Georgia, and you are still only at 265. Right now today, you see it doable, John?
He's got to close maybe a 7-point gap or so. That's in those states where he would need at least one more state to either get electoral college tie or to actually win. He's down at least maybe 7 points, 6 points in states like Wisconsin, states like Pennsylvania, states like New Hampshire. So that's what's really difficult. Closing a 7-point gap, it's not completely unthinkable. He's done it before in the past, and usually how he's done that is it really hasn't taken much. He's just sort of behaved presidentially. He went to Mexico, did that trip. He did outreach outreach to a black church. But, you know, it's getting really late in the game. We've only got 2 weeks left to go, and it seems like the cake is kind of baked at this point.
Okay, all right. We'll see. Early voting starts today in Florida. John, I think any of these scenarios, you always come back to Florida. 29 electoral votes. You really don't get there unless you get Florida. I asked Rove about this last hour. He reflected a little bit about what you said, but just listen to him carefully here.
To get to 270, he's got to win states where he is at or above the national average of the gap. He's got to win a Pennsylvania or a Wisconsin or a Colorado or New Hampshire and Michigan or some combination thereof. And it's an inside straight, difficult to do. People do it, but it's really, really tough to do.
And on that point, John, if you hold all the states that Romney won, you still need to do a little bit better than 4 years ago. But what Rove describes under this scenario right now at 265, Wisconsin puts him over the top. Likewise for Pennsylvania or Michigan or New Hampshire. That math works if you can get the votes.
It certainly does, and like Rose said, it's 7 points down with 2 weeks to go. How do you turn things around? As I said, he's done it before in the past by behaving presidentially, but he hasn't given any indication he's going to do that. In the last week, he's said that he may not accept the election results. He's been attacking Paul Ryan, fighting with fellow Republicans. Just yesterday, he threatened lawsuits against those who have been accusing him in the press, women who have been accusing him of sexual harassment or assault. So again, with 2 weeks left to go, you would think he would need to really turn things around, behave differently, and even then, it's going to be really tough to close that 7 point gap.
You watch the numbers in Arizona and in Texas and Georgia. Do you really think these states are changing the way some of the pollsters suggest?
That's what the polls show right now. In Arizona, he's down just a smidge. He's still ahead narrowly in states like Utah, Texas, and Georgia. I tend to believe the polls. I think that they've generally done a pretty good job, and especially if you look at the polling averages. Again, he's ahead in Texas and Georgia. I would suspect that unless, the bottom really falls out these last 2 weeks, if he just kind of gives up, he'll still be able to win those states, I would think. But again, he's got to hold those states and then take another 5 or 6 battleground states.
We're going to look at the Senate coming up in about 30 minutes. John, thanks for coming in today out of Washington. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Here's Martha.
Well, thousands of soldiers who were paid bonuses to go fight for our country. Now, many of those same men and women in one state are being ordered to pay the money back or else. The growing controversy and the penalties that these heroes could face. Big controversy surrounding the California National Guard and nearly 10,000 reservists who've been ordered to give back a huge enlistment bonus a full decade after they were paid out. Some are calling this a betrayal of our fighting men and women. Anita Vogel live in Los Angeles. So, Anita, you have spoken with some of these veterans who received this money and are now being asked to give it back for their service. What's their reaction?
Well, good morning, Martha. It's exactly like you said. They said they feel betrayed. They feel even stunned in some cases. Apparently what happened here is a number of audits revealed the Guard gave out too much money, and in some cases to the wrong people, even though all of these folks completed their duties overseas. Now nearly 10,000 soldiers in California alone have been ordered to pay back their bonuses of roughly $15,000 or more, leaving most folks in a terrible position of how to come up with the money and how to get past the bad taste in their mouths.
We were asked to complete these terms of service, do these tasks. We did so, and on the back end you're saying, well, there's a technicality, we want our money back. That's absurd. It's insulting. It's also degrading to what we've done.
Like so many others, Bob DeAndre says he's already worked with a number of lawyers. He spent a lot of time, a lot of money, and he has yet to resolve this issue.
Wow.
Martha.
So what does the National Guard say about all this, Anita?
Yeah, the National Guard says, or the California National Guard, rather, they say this is a federal issue and their hands are tied. They gave us a statement saying, quote, the California National Guard does not have the authority to unilaterally waive these debts. However, the California National Guard welcomes any law passed by Congress to waive these debts. Until that time, our priority is to advocate for our soldiers through this difficult process. Now, many high-profile veterans are highly critical of that statement, of this whole thing, really, saying the burden shouldn't be on the veteran to wipe away this debt.
They gave it the office, and their office was a battlefield. Those who are running for office right now ought to be pledging right now before the election to fix this and fix it fast.
And apparently some members of Congress on both sides of the aisle are speaking out about this. We're hearing from both Democrats and Republicans. In fact, just this morning, Representative Darrell Issa put out a statement. He's calling on Defense Secretary Ash Carter to demand that these to demand that this halts and for the veterans to pay the money back. And he wants Congress to do something about it right now. Martha.
Anita, thank you very much. Wouldn't you love to see the congressman or congresswoman who's willing to stand up and say, no, I don't think so. I think they better pay back the money. I mean, you think about the stuff the government wastes millions of dollars on. The $15,000 mistake that was their mistake needs to be righted.
Administrative issues are not right. We're going to talk to Pete Hegseth coming up in a moment here with a U.S. Iraq Afghan war veteran, too. So Pete's coming up on that. Also, in the meantime, there are brand new WikiLeaks bombshells out just this morning. Are there damaging revelations now about the Clinton Family Foundation? So what's in this batch? We'll show you top of the hour when we come back.
Just going through a brand new release from WikiLeaks that reveals major worries with the Clinton campaign about workplace discrimination within the campaign and the foundation, and gender inequality in terms of how men and women were paid at the Clinton Foundation. So they're going to have to explain what that's all about. Welcome, everybody. Brand new hour now of America's Newsroom. I'm Martha McCallum.
And I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning. WikiLeaks making headlines for the 17th day in a row. We're sorting through more than 30,000 posted online. Wow. From the account of Clinton campaign chair John Podesta. The emails revealing concerns about unequal pay for women working at the Clinton Foundation. Ed Henry's on that live in D.C. Ed, you've been going over this again today. What are the revelations about pay equity at the foundation?
Well, Bill, it's interesting because, you know, Hillary Clinton, one of the staples of her stump speech is to say that Donald Trump doesn't treat women fairly and has abused them, and that she's all about issues like pay equity to make sure women are treated fairly. Well, look at this email that has emerged from within the Clinton Foundation, as there were stories in 2015 about the White House maybe not paying women equally. Quote, given the story yesterday about pay equity at the State Department, I wanted to flag something that came out of our research on pay equity at the foundation. There are huge discrepancies, and it wouldn't surprise me if they went here next, as in the media pressing them. We haven't really seen the media, by and large, do that, but it's interesting that within the foundation itself, their own research had suggested they were not paying women equally. Sounds like a little hypocrisy.
She's trying to get Sanders supporters to come over to her side. How does this factor in, or does it?
Well, that's a big part of the turnout operation and the ground game, obviously, to help make sure that the polls that show Hillary Clinton are ahead actually pan out on Election Day. Interesting that John Podesta, in another email, remember he had called Bernie Sanders a doofus, attacks his health care plan. It says, quote, his actual proposal sucks, but we live in a lefty alternative universe. Well, we reached out to Bernie Sanders in his office to see whether any of these attacks that are coming out within the emails are affecting him. He seemed to suggest no, telling us in a statement, quote, the job of the progressive movement now is to look forward, not backward. No matter what Secretary Clinton may have said years ago behind closed doors, what's important today is that millions of people stand up and demand that the Democratic Party implement the most progressive platform in the history of our country. So I think the bottom line there is, despite some of these revelations, you have people within the Democratic Party saying, you know what, we're not looking backward, we're looking forward, Bill. So they're letting her off the hook.
Okay, all right, get back at it, all right? Day 17. More to come. Thanks, Ed. Martha.
Thanks, buddy.
So a lot of the information about the Clinton campaign from WikiLeaks, but voters seem to be paying a lot more attention to the issues surrounding Donald Trump. Steve Hayes, a senior writer for the Weekly Standard and a Fox News contributor. Steve, good morning to you.
Morning, Martha.
Lots of stuff coming out this morning, and more that we're pouring through and may be able to get up on the screen in a few moments. But, you know, your take on sort of how this is being treated and what's getting more attention.
Well, I mean, certainly the media are paying more attention to Donald Trump's troubles, his electoral prospects, the accusers, and the things that Donald Trump himself is saying in many of his speeches. I mean, it makes it easier for the media to justify continued attention on Donald Trump and the story about the accusers when Donald Trump says, for instance, as he did this weekend, that he's going to sue his accusers after the election. But that doesn't in any way diminish the importance or significance of some of the revelations that are coming out of these WikiLeaks documents, whether you're talking about marking certain potential assistance programs in Haiti for friends of Bill, whether you're talking about this very troubling story about the King of Morocco and Hillary Clinton agreeing to do an event there for the Clinton Global Initiative in exchange for $12 million, at least as described in an email from Huma Abedin. These are serious issues. I think they indicate a certain level of Clinton corruption that many of us assumed was there, we'd seen in the past was there, but they provide new and I think troubling details.
Yeah. I think to the extent that these permeate people's understanding of the election, they are disturbed by it when they see the levels of corruption, the levels of what some accuse are pay to play. But Donald Trump has not sort of held up his end of the bargain in some ways when it comes to focusing on things like what he's got in this contract with America that he came out with over the weekend, and making sure that those points are the ones that do get through when his stuff does break through.
Yeah, I mean, he sort of can't help himself. There's a lot of material here for a Republican to work with, for Republican Senate candidates, for a different Republican nominee perhaps, but Donald Trump sort of can't get out of his own way, and anytime he is attacked or accused of something by the media, he feels the need to respond, to defend himself at length, to lash out at his accusers. We've seen this play out during the debates, both in the primaries and in the general election. We see it now in his stump speeches. I mean, his speech in Gettysburg was billed as this dramatic departure, somebody who was going to focus on substance and take on Washington, lay out exactly how he was going to do that. And there was some of that in the speech, but it was overshadowed by the things that he said about his accusers and his need to defend himself in the sort of news cycle story of the day.
But he would say, and his folks would say, that that's because the press just decided to focus on those three lines rather than the substance of his speech, and that there's a huge sort of conglomerate effort against him in the press. 2-page spread in the New York Times today, Steve, listing all of the people that have been insulted by Donald Trump, and some of them are really reaches.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm not unsympathetic to the argument that the media are now, I mean, it's as if reporters are trying to outdo one another to take the next shot at Donald Trump. I get that. I think that's true. But if you're the Trump campaign and you're looking at 2 weeks and 1 day to Election Day, why would you do anything to give them more material? Absolutely. I mean, why would he include those three lines in the speech if you know, based on your experience over the past 18 months, that that's what will be the focus? I mean, I also do think, on the other hand, it is the case that some of these stories, some of these things that Donald Trump says require additional media attention, require additional scrutiny. I mean, it is newsworthy when he accuses all of his accusers of having made stuff up, when Trump, in fact, himself has suggested that he might have behaved in these kinds of ways. So, the media has to cover that. So I think the Trump campaign can complain about the excesses. I don't think they can complain about the basis of the coverage itself.
Yeah. I mean, the story was sort of starting to fade a little bit, and he brought it right back into the focus clearly over the weekend. Steve, thank you very much. Good to see you this morning. You bet.
As we said 15 days ago, and both parties trying to control the balance of power in Congress, President Obama campaigning for Hillary Clinton last night in Las Vegas, telling supporters they must do all they can to make sure Clinton wins the White House and Democratic candidates take the House and the Senate.
Presidents can't do everything on their own. If I didn't have Harry, then I couldn't have gotten done what I got done. If we didn't have Nancy Pelosi, we would not have passed so many of the laws that have benefited millions of Americans.
Rich Edson's watching the Clinton team. Manchester, New Hampshire is the first stop of the day. How you doing, Rich? Good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Doing well here. And Hillary Clinton and her campaign are spending more time, resources, and rhetoric trying to get Democrats elected to Congress. Clinton herself has acknowledged that she's not really spending all that much time responding to Donald Trump, as she says, because she's already debated him for 4.5 hours. After the final debate, Clinton traveled to and campaigned for Democrats in states like Pennsylvania and North Carolina. Meanwhile, here in New Hampshire, Governor Maggie Hassan, the Democrat, is trying to unseat Kelly Ayotte, the Republican incumbent senator here. What's allowing the Clinton campaign to do so is her rise in the polls. Even Senator Tim Kaine, her running mate, is acknowledging and touting the campaign's confidence going into the general election.
And what you start to do is you look at who's asking for absentee ballots, who's participating in early vote, who is registering for the first time, and all over the country, I'm going to tell you, we are seeing evidence that this could be a very big and historic win for Hillary Clinton.
Republicans also seem a little more focused on Congress. There are some conservative and Republican-aligned groups that are running ads that essentially say Republicans go out and vote to maintain Congress and control of it so we can combat or temper any type of Clinton White House initiative from there. Just a little bit, Hillary Clinton will campaign with liberal Senator Elizabeth Warren. As the two appear together, there are skeptics who are wondering how long they will be together, at least on policy issues, especially the specter of Hillary Clinton cutting deals with Senator Mitch McConnell, of a majority leader in the Senate right now, or a Republican-controlled House, and certainly on the issue of regulatory appointments. There are reports that Elizabeth Warren and her allies are assembling a list of those who should not be appointed to regulatory posts because of their ties to Wall Street and corporations. And remember, when you tie this into the whole WikiLeaks thing that came out, a couple of the pieces of information we learned from the speeches that Hillary Clinton gave to Wall Street firms. She said when coming to and regulating Wall Street that those who are in the industry seem to know the industry best.
Wow.
Bill, back to
All
you.
right, Rich, thank you. Rich Edson watching that. Rich, where you are in New Hampshire, by the way, you're going to have a really good battle here for the Senate with Kelly Ayotte in a tough race right now. Republicans 54, Democrats 46. That's where the Senate stands right now. And come election night in 15 days from now, you're going to see this could go very late into the night. Democrats think they've got a chance of at least pulling even at 50-50. We'll see how that goes right now in New Hampshire. This is well within the margin of error right now with Kelly Ayotte there trying to hold her peace. This is where Democrats believe they've got a shot at making this interesting. They think they're good in Wisconsin and then also in Illinois. If they could flip like in New Hampshire and flip perhaps in North Carolina, well, then you're already looking at 50-50. But then you've got Republicans out here battling in Indiana, which is a really good race as well. Out in Nevada with Joe Heck, if Republicans could flip that state and take the seat that will be vacated by Harry Reid. You start to see a number of scenarios where you either hang on to it by a vote or it's 50-50. And you can start to see places like North Carolina now. This is within the margin of error, too. Richard Burr trying to hang on to his seat. And I mentioned Indiana. Evan Bayh had a huge lead in that state for months, and Todd Young has really closed the margin in Indiana. It's about 4 points right now, perhaps a little less, depending on the polling and what you look at. And I mentioned out here in Nevada too, with Harry Reid's seat open, Joe Heck is in a battle with Catherine Cortez Masto, and this is where we see it today. It's about a 2-point race right now, but again, still within the margin of error. The bottom line in all of this is that the balance of power in the Senate will be something that will have a lot of drama come election night. We're going to see how this goes and see whether or not Republicans can hold power in that part of Congress. Martha.
All right. Thanks. So tragedy strikes moments after takeoff. A small surveillance plane crashed into the runway and erupted into a ball of flames. The breaking details on where this happened and who was on board.
Also, a Georgia teenager survives a 3-day coma but wakes up speaking an entirely different language. How the doctors are explaining this one.
How about that, right? And Donald Trump choosing historic Gettysburg to lay out his contract with the American voter. But did he muddle the message by bringing up the women who had accused him? When we come back?
If they can fight somebody like me, who has unlimited resources to fight back, just look at what they can do to you, your jobs, your security, your education, your health care, the violation of religious liberty, the theft of your Second Amendment. When I saw the trouble our country was in, I knew I couldn't stand by and watch any longer. Our country has been so good to me. I love our country, and I felt I had to act.
That was Donald Trump over the weekend delivering his own Gettysburg Address. Mr. Trump at the famous Civil War battleground offering a contract to American voters, vowed to crack down on Washington and promised to deliver on the economy, immigration, and national security. But after laying out his vision, he went after his accusers. So did his original message end up getting lost in that shuffle? Former Maryland Governor Robert Ehrlich is a Donald Trump supporter, and he joins us now.
Hey, Martha, how you
Governor,
doing?
good morning. Good to have you with us this morning. So that's what's getting all the attention this morning.
Martha, you know, that clip you played is the best of Trump. I mean, it was the best of Trump from the heart, and it also laid out an agenda, by the way, that congressional Republicans should have been laying out for the last 2 years. And I understand your point about getting off topic, but this is quintessential Trump, as you know. He's going to throw in the agenda with responding to the attacks. It's his personality. It's him. It defines him. It defines this movement. And so you get both. And whether you're going to buy both or not, we'll find out in 2 weeks. But this is, as I said, Trump real. This is not a consultant. This is not listening to paid folks in Washington from the establishment. This is unvarnished Trump.
But, you know, he had a period back in September where he maybe was listening to his advisors a little bit more, and he really stayed focused, and there wasn't a lot of this stuff going on to grab everybody's attention, and he did well. So why would he not be doing that at what couldn't be a more crucial time?
Point well taken, but also, as you said, the media, though, it's been it's been incredible, the attacks over the past few weeks, and he's not going to change his MO with regard to responding to those attacks, because this is him. You saw it in the debates. Now you saw a third debate.
But Governor, it's preventing him perhaps from accomplishing his goal.
Issue.
And is that frustrating to supporters like you, who I just can imagine that must be pretty tough to watch.
Well, listen, you're talking about, again, my notes here from the contract, from infrastructure and climate change and repealing Obamacare and immigration reform and tax reform and corporate, as a former governor, making Medicaid a state function. These are all great ideas. They're substance. They're real. It's important. Your other report, and Steve really put it best, we have a lot of material to deal with, and it's also the uber left on steroids. Elizabeth Warren wants to vet Hillary Clinton's appointments to her cabinet. Are you kidding me? Talk about 4 more years of Obama. This is really the uber left on steroids, and that's what hopefully these last few weeks we can focus on, Martha. To the extent we don't, it's our problem. Our campaign will fail. America will fail. But he needs to do it, and all of his surrogates need to do it, and his campaign needs to do it, certainly.
You know, I think back to the Romney campaign and Donald Trump talking about how frustrated he was with Mitt Romney and how he thought he was a failed candidate and that he choked because he wasn't willing to go there against his opponent and sort of lay out, the vision that he felt was destroying the country, essentially.
He set out his vision here.
But Donald Trump could be accused of the same thing by Republicans and conservatives who wanted him to, carry that mantle once he got into the position to do so. And they would say to him, but you're undisciplined.
Well, again, most of that speech was terrific. It was from the heart. It was why he ran. It defined him as a candidate, defined his movement, his sort of philosophical foundation. He lays out a program for America, which is pretty, by the way, reliably Republican, conservative, right of center, whatever term you want to use. He obviously, but again, your point, got it. He takes a few minutes to do his thing with regard to his detractors, to get back at them, and that's, again, his personality. This is not someone who's going to listen to the consultants.
I think the country's gotten, to some extent used to it, but it's not being reflected well for him in the numbers. For the next 2 weeks, can he stay on message, and can he close the gap, I guess, is the political question that you guys face.
Well, it is. And your last half hour of your show has been about, all the WikiLeaks, and today the story of Virginia and Clinton scandal after WikiLeaks email after private server. And listen, my view is 85% substance and 15%. And by the way, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get Elizabeth Warren, and you're going to get more scandals and more grand juries and more ethical problems. These are the Clintons. This is what they do. But again, I think more of a focus on the contrast between right-left here, liberal-conservative, the heartland. You know, he's closed the deal with those voters that Mitt Romney could not close the deal with, those working-class folks that you all have been talking about, and all of us have been talking about for years as Republicans. Now he needs to expand that base.
All right, Governor Ehrlich, thank you. Good to have you with us today.
My pleasure. Good to see you.
In a moment, new details about a link between a Hillary Clinton ally and the FBI. The campaign donation that's raising questions about a conflict of interest. Poll watchers alert to any signs of voter fraud, the way hackers could create problems for the race without ever changing a vote.
We have to be prepared for it. We have to be organized about it. You shouldn't be turning anyone away. Anyone who has a right to vote should be able to cast that ballot without any sort of hesitancy.
Election officials keeping an eye out for voter fraud amid concerns that hackers could cause problems. Experts warning that someone could change the voter registration list or party affiliation, impacting the election without altering any votes. Eric Shawn live in our newsroom. What's up with this?
Yeah, hey, Bill. Well, election officials tell me there are now some new warnings from the FBI about potential hacking of the nation's voter registration rolls.
The Department of Homeland Security says hackers have tried to attack the voter registration rolls in 20 states. Russian hackers are suspected of hitting Illinois, grabbing upwards of 200,000 names, and Arizona this summer. In Ohio, Secretary of State John Husted says voter rolls in his state could be vulnerable.
Our voter registration system is connected to the internet, and so that does expose us to a potential cyber attack.
Husted says the state's voter registration lists are backed up every night and is confident voters will be protected.
I think there's a potential for disruption, but not a potential for chaos because of the backup systems that we have in place, and we're doing all we can, but as I noted, you can never eliminate the threat.
In the last presidential election, many states saw long lines and delays of hours at polling places. Some fear if hackers get into the voter rolls this time, they could make the problems even worse.
It's a terrifying thought to think that our system could be hacked. The greatest system in the world could be hacked.
New York voter Muffy Potter Aston waited hours to vote in 2012 and says there was more confusion in the voter registration rolls when she showed up in April. She hopes officials do have the ability to safeguard the election system by preventing any hack, saying everyone's vote should be protected.
We have to be prepared for it. We have to be organized about it. You shouldn't be turning anyone away. Anyone who has a right to vote should be able to cast that ballot without any sort of hesitancy.
Ms. Aston also says our computerized election system should be expanded to make voting easier as well as foolproof. She also told me she does plan to go to her polling place early to vote to make sure she is registered correctly in the books and that her vote will be counted, which of course is something the rest of us would also hope when we show up to vote.
Thank you, Eric. Eric Shawn in New York City. Thank you, sir. Martha.
So a hefty donation made by a longtime Clinton ally is raising some eyebrows. The link it has to an official FBI member who helped oversee the investigation into the email server.
Also, we have a World Series that's been a few lifetimes in the making. The Cubs taking on the Indians, Chicago and Cleveland. So which town is going to overcome a major World Championship drought? Nice. There are new allegations against Hillary Clinton and some of her allies. According to the Wall Street Journal today, longtime Clinton friend Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe's political organization donated nearly $500,000 to the election campaign of Dr. Jill McCabe about a year ago. That was March of 2015 now. She's married to Andrew McCabe, now the deputy director of the FBI, who later helped oversee the investigation into Clinton's email use. For more on this, we have Governor John Sununu, former White House Chief of Staff to President George H.W. Bush and author of The Quiet Man. Also with us, we have the judge, Anna Napolitano, Fox News senior judicial analyst. You have the legal and you have the political. Let's start with the legal, Judge. Is this against the law?
Well, no, it is not against the law. I mean, under Virginia law, Governor McAuliffe can make contributions of that magnitude from a variety of entities that he controlled to Dr. McCabe, that's Andrew McCabe's wife, Dr. McCabe's failed Senate campaign a year ago. And under the law, Andrew McCabe, as the number 2 person in the FBI, can supervise the investigation of Mrs. Clinton. But there is the appearance of impropriety. There is the appearance that he was aware of the relationship of Terry McAuliffe to the Clintons. Governor Sununu can speak to that. That relationship is well documented. It's political, personal, and financial. And that makes it look like his decisions would be colored by his wishes to please the people that are behind the person who gave this money to his wife. I mean, that's it.
What should he have done?
He should have excused himself from the case because as a lawyer, he has the duty to avoid, quote, the appearance of impropriety. And the appearance of impropriety here is profound. Now, I've got a couple of takeaways here. One is, how did we learn about this? We learned about this from a tip from several FBI agents who were part of the team that investigated Mrs. Clinton, who believe that their work was destroyed by management in the FBI. Hardworking men and women in the FBI who actually gathered the evidence against her, who were prevented from presenting it to a grand jury, who couldn't get search warrants, who couldn't get subpoenas because of decisions made by Director Comey and Deputy Director McCabe. So we really have a situation here that looks terrible.
So the agents were ticked off.
Yes.
And that's why the information is now public. You stand by 1 second here. Let's get the political side of this. And Governor, good day to you. The judge has a feeling that the constant drip, drip, drip of this is already baked into the voting public's minds, and you can throw whatever you want at the wall, but nothing more will stick now. What is your feeling on that when you're looking at an election from 15 days now?
Well, we've got to start talking about it in stark terms. This is another defining example of the culture of corruption that the Clintons have brought to the Democratic Party for the last quarter century. Since 1992, they've infused this culture of corruption, and it is now reaching into the FBI, which used to be one of the most hallowed and respected institutions in the U.S. government. They used to bend over backwards to show that they weren't related to a party, and now you have this action by Terry McAuliffe, friend of the Clintons, putting money into the campaign of the wife of this deputy director. It's unbelievable. The Clintons have created this culture that infused the party, and you had the Democratic leadership trying to stick it to Bernie Sanders. You had the Clintons enriching themselves individually in terms of wealth and in terms of power, and that extension of power is shown by their capacity to influence the FBI.
Let me stop you there, Governor. Dr. Joe McCabe, in a statement, put this out, and it reads the following. My husband had no formal role in my campaign other than to be a supportive husband to me and our children. As a federal official, everyone who participated in our campaign understood and respected that he could not participate, end quote. You just heard what the judge said. He said there is no violation of the law here.
It's not a question of illegality. It's a question of corruption. It's a question of bringing to the political process an aggrandizement of themselves and control of the system. It reached into the FBI, and with all due respect to that statement from the wife of the deputy director, that's just garbage. A $500,000 plus contribution to that lady from the Clinton-controlled operation certainly had an influence on her husband.
She lost the election, but I think the entire campaign was about $1.8 million. Sounds like a lot of money for a state office. Is it, or is that the norm?
And almost half of it funded by the Clintons. You don't think that they're planning ahead in terms of how to influence the process. This is corruption in the Democratic Party. This election has to be an election of change and throwing out this party that has, even the President of the United States today was nurtured and promoted by the corrupt political system in Chicago. Corruption is the keynote of the Democratic Party, and they're trying to convince America that a 15-year-old tape with garbage talk on it is more important than these issues of corruption, including what happened with the server, where they were deliberately trying to hide things from the public and from scrutiny.
Okay, now
this has to change.
On that server issue, Judge, last point. The donation happened in March of 2015.
Right.
That was the same hot month where the emails were deleted, the order came from Congress, and on and on.
That's when the investigation began, and it was assigned to Mr. McCabe, to Director McCabe. Two other points. Terry McAuliffe himself is being investigated by the FBI for allegations of corruption. We do not know if McCabe is in charge of that investigation as well. The governor is exactly correct. It's a question of corruption. It's not a question of violating the law.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Governor. Gentlemen, appreciate you coming on today. You bet. 20 before the hour. Here's Martha.
So a decade after signing up to go to war, thousands of soldiers are being told to give back the enlistment bonus that they received. For many, that money is long gone. So what happens if they don't come up with the cash?
They gave it the office, and their office was a battlefield. Those who are running for office right now ought to be pledging right now before the election to fix this and fix it fast.
It's responding to a deal that could turn AT&T into a media giant. The phone company reaching an agreement to buy Time Warner for $85 billion. Now, if that deal goes through, it would gather millions of wireless and television subscribers into one of the biggest media companies the world has ever known. But not everyone approves. Donald Trump on Saturday denounced the agreement, saying it would, quote, destroy democracy. His administration would block the deal. Hillary Clinton sounds like she agrees with Trump, saying that more competition is still better ultimately for consumers. So we'll see how this goes now. Watch it.
Worse than that, I understand why they're doing what they're doing. What really bothers me is that there's no due process. There's no process in place for those of us who legitimately did get bonuses, for those of us, which is the majority, that did our time, took these bonuses in good faith.
So that was retired Army Major and Iraq War veteran Robert DeAndrea. He is one of nearly 10,000 soldiers who are being asked to pay back a bonus that he received from the California National Guard for going to war in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Pentagon, though, is coming under fire for demanding this money back. House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy is leading the way from California, and he released this statement, quote, "It is disgraceful that men and women who answered their country's call to duty following September 11th are now facing forced repayments of bonuses offered to them. Our military heroes should not shoulder the burden of military recruiters' faults from a decade or more so ago." Pete Hegseth joins us now, veteran of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and a Fox News contributor and someone who's worked tirelessly on behalf of veterans. Pete, good to see you this morning. Welcome.
Good to see you.
So what happened here? Explain, why they got these bonuses and the fact that some people did apparently get them improperly.
Some did. I mean, the basic contours of this are 10 years ago, we're in the middle of a hot war. We need people signing up again. As a result, we're giving them bonuses in specialty jobs and also general jobs, large bonuses, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to sign for 3 to 6 more years at a time of war where they potentially may go back to Iraq and Afghanistan. So the program makes sense. And they sign in good faith because they understand, hey, I'm putting my life on the line and the military is going to compensate me for it. That's what it is in general. Fast forward 10 years later, someone did an audit and looked at maybe there were some improper processes, some who didn't necessarily qualify, or there was some corruption inside the bureaucracy. But who's being blamed for it? It's that individual soldier who thought they could sign up for 3 to 6 years for this bonus and serve their country. That's the outrage, is that we made a promise to these guys, we put money in their bank account, and then 10 years later, we're taking it out without explanation, and we're doing it with a wide net. So even those who maybe did do so improperly, they're being hit, but so are the ones that did nothing wrong.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin McCarthy is leading the charge on this. It seems pretty obvious, I think, to most Americans and most politicians that this would be a very wrong move. And when you look at the stuff that we waste money on in this country, to take back money from people who used it in many ways to, put a down payment on a house, to, make an investment in their future, seems mean and ridiculous.
And it is. And that's why I think this will change. Ultimately, the California National Guard can do nothing about it because it's a federal issue. So Kevin McCarthy and others are fighting to get this taken back, and I think it will be because the American people, there's just a sense that this is wrong, and it is. This has happened to me before in my military career. The military pay system is a complicated, tricky thing. They took back parts of a bonus I got many number of years ago. I was never told about it. It just started coming out of my paycheck. So if you're the individual soldier, pretty soon you start losing money, or you start getting bills, you start getting threatened by a bureaucracy you have nowhere to go except your champions in Congress. So this should get fixed. It will get fixed because it's an outrage. It really, really is, especially when you look at the billions we spend on illegal immigrants and a lot of other things. We can't help out a few soldiers from California who went to Iraq for us. I think we know the answer to that.
And also, I don't understand why they can't. You say there were certain instances where perhaps somebody received it by mistake. I mean, then just isolate those incidents and ask those people for the money back. I mean, there's no reason to do a blanket over this. And can't they? There's 10,000 people. They have so many people working in these bureaucracies. They can't spend a little time to figure out who they are.
Well, you hit the key word on it, Martha. It's bureaucracy. Bureaucracies don't do specialization very well. So they use a few criteria and then they apply to all. And unfortunately, that is what's happening in California. There's one other part here. The California National Guard did have issues with a recruiting scandal a number of years ago. So there's extra eyeballs and scrutiny there. There were some recruiters that were doing some improper things. Yeah. This is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about soldiers that signed thinking one thing that are now being hoodwinked 10 years later. Yeah. So the bureaucracy is in its own way. It's going to take members of Congress to fight for the soldier on the ground.
Well, that would be time well spent on their part. It seems like the focus and the push ought to be back on the bureaucracy to get it right and to figure out who those individuals are and not punish the rest of them. That really shouldn't be that hard to do. Pete, thank you very much. Is. Yeah, good to have you here, Pete.
You got it.
We'll
Thanks,
see you
Martha.
soon.
So John Scott's coming up next on Happening Now, and good Monday, John. How are you?
Good Monday morning to you. You know what 2 weeks from tomorrow is? Election Day. But early voting is underway now in several more states today, including most of Florida. That's where we find Donald Trump today, plus Hillary Clinton vice presidential pick Tim Kaine, also in the Sunshine State. And we're waiting for a Clinton rally in Manchester, New Hampshire, another battleground. We have new polling to share, plus the mainstream media. Are they writing off Mr. Trump too soon? Also today, a disturbing new discovery about earthquakes in California and an update on that internet attack on Friday. It's all ahead, happening now.
Good deal, John. See you then.
See you then. Thanks.
12 minutes away. The Chicago Cubs won the National League pennant over the weekend. What a celebration this was in Chicago. They behaved, too, by the way.
Really good time.
Yeah. Now they face the Cleveland Indians in what will no doubt be a matchup for the history books for both cities. Wow. Cleveland, Chicago, we'll tell you why. Coming up.
Left side. Out. The Cubs have won the pennant.
Nice. Cubs win. Lots of celebrating in Chicago. Cubs won the pennant over the weekend. That win putting them up against Cleveland Indians in Game 1 of the World Series on Tuesday night, only here on Fox. Wow. That is awesome.
They're having fun.
Jim Gray, sportscaster, Fox News contributor with me now. How you doing, Jim? Good morning to you. I think this is great for Cleveland and Chicago, clearly. I also think it's great for baseball as a game, for the sport.
Bill, you're right on both counts. This is great for America. What a better time could this come? People having fun, total enjoyment, 176 years combined. These two teams have not won a World Series. Indians had a chance. They were an out away. The heartbreak of Edgar Renteria and the Marlins back in '97. But 108 years now, 108 years has been the drought in Chicago. And just look at the celebrations. And just look at the joy that this has brought to people. They've been waiting their entire life for this, so it's just wonderful, and let's hope it plays out and it can give the country just a great break from this election.
Yeah, Chicago was 1908, is that right? All right, so since the last time they won the World Series in Chicago, we have invented the following things. You ready, Jim? More than the iPhone, we've invented the toaster, the traffic light, sliced bread came along, bubble gum, and sunglasses from 1929.
And it's been 1948. Don't short the Indians. They haven't won in a long, long time, too. But the Indians won 94 games, 103 games. The Cubs have won. So these two teams, and they played just terrific baseball in getting there, beating San Francisco, the Giants, and then Los Angeles, and, of course, Boston and Tampa. And these two managers have done a great job. Terry Francona, think about what he might be able to accomplish with the Indians as you see him getting some hugs right there. He broke the Red Sox jinx, 86 years for them, and now he could do it 68 years for the Indians. And, of course, Joe Maddon has just been wonderful. Had a great run. He's a 3-time manager of the year. It's just going to be a good time. He won a World Series ring with the Angels on the bench for Mike Scioscia in 2002. Here's one other thing I want to throw out here, Bill. Only twice in the history of MLB and NBA have teams won a World Series and, of course, the Baseball World Series. And that was the 2002, the Lakers and the Angels, and 1988, the Lakers and the Dodgers. So the Indians and the Cavs have that chance. The Cavs are getting their rings on Tuesday night, an hour before the series starts.
Everything's going on in Cleveland, isn't it? Jim, thank you so much.